we look at the world that faces us today. And I think for most of us in this room, it is almost unbelievable that we find ourselves as the American people in the situation that we're in. You will all remember, as I do, 7 years ago, a United States Senator running for president who tried to sell and successfully did sell to the American people the idea that America was the cause of violence in the world. That if America pulled back from Iraq, that if America pulled back from Afghanistan, that if America traveled the world and gave nice speeches and professed love to everyone, that America would be loved and that the world would be a more peaceful place. Hope and change. Strength must come first. And this president has shown now what the lack of American leadership and American strength can do to the world. A president who now sees a Middle East on fire, Libya on fire, Egypt under martial law, and a runaway situation in more countries than we can count on two hands. And what he needs is to be strong to stand up and to say to those who cause this violence in the world that America will not stand for it. Instead, he draws red lines in Syria, and then when Assad uses chemical weapons on his people, he says, never mind, and allows other bad actors in the world to fill that vacuum. It seems at times that this president is unwilling to stand up to anyone in the world other than Prime Minister Netanyahu, who actually happens to be our friend. No other leader in the world is this president willing to stand up to and speak against. Ironic now that as the world comes apart, the president only has the resolve to stand up to our friends and not to stand up to evil. What would showing strength and standing up to evil look like? First, it would be this. As long as Iran believes that Israel does not have the right to exist and that America should die as well, they are not a part of the civilized world and should not be a part of any negotiations or civilized nation participation. Imagine that we have the greatest sponsor of state terrorism in the world, who we are not only permitting, but we're inviting to join the nuclear club. Imagine that we have an American president who is trying to convince us, and remember, as he tried to convince us 7 years ago, that somehow Iran will change. Well, as sad as it is to say, I'm old enough now to remember 1979. I'm old enough to remember this Iranian regime taking American hostages and holding them for 444 days. They have been saying death to America since that day. And they have not stopped. Not once. I see no indication of an Iranian change of behavior. I see no glimmer of light. And yet, this president wants to create that glimmer to fool us. To fool us and to fool the world. It's not there. The glimmer of light is not there, and the president is, as he did 7 years ago, fooling us again. So what should we do? We should make it very clear. I saw a political cartoon in the New York Post about 6 weeks ago. It had our president sitting across the table from the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah was screaming, "Death to America." And the president said in response, "If that's a deal breaker for you, let's talk about it." Funny if it wasn't true. Funny if it wasn't true. How can we sit and negotiate the future of the Iranians' weaponry without Israel and their neighbors at the table to negotiate those things as well, the people who will be most directly affected? How can we permit this type of thing to go on? It's because, quite frankly, evil is not being met with strength. The simple way to handle this, in the most direct way, is to say to the Iranians, we won't talk to you until you acknowledge and affirm Israel's right to exist. We won't talk to you until you stop exporting terrorism and paying for the rockets that are being shot all across the Middle East. We will not talk to you until you join the civilized group of nations. And that's not just by talk, everybody, that's by action. If the American president demanded that, the American president would get the respect of the world again, not where we stand right now. We cannot permit anyone in this world to use this moment of American weakness to make matters even worse. So for those who sit in the United Nations and say somehow that they are going to attempt to impose upon the world a Palestinian state, and to threaten Israel with sanctions if they do not agree, America should stand up and use its veto to say absolutely not. Peace must be earned. Being welcomed into the world of civilized nations must be earned by conduct, not by just being willing to wait around long enough until you tire us out. Tire out a weak president at the end of his term who cares more about the 2 L's right now than he cares about world peace and American strength and Israel's survival. This is a president who cares more about legacy and library than he cares about making sure that the world is a safe and secure place for our people. Now, I've been accused many times of being too direct and too blunt. And there have been some who say that I shouldn't say exactly what's on my mind, that my mother at some point should have installed that filter that people talk about. They don't understand. I'm from New Jersey. We don't have them there. And maybe everybody, it's time that we use some of that filtering as well. Because unless we show our strength and our resolve together, evil will triumph. Unless we say to ourselves that we are willing to take risk that goes along with expressing our views in a way that is unfiltered, that the world will misunderstand our purpose. Our people, this country, has a very large heart. All the things I talked about before, we want to love, we want to believe, we want to forgive, we want to work and live together. But not at the end of a loaded gun, not at the end of an intercontinental ballistic missile, not at the end of a theocracy that believes there is only one way for the world to be run and that they've determined it. Those are things that we cannot live with. And so if strength must be used to fight that back, we need to be strong and to speak clearly, not only to our allies, but to our adversaries. Our friends in Israel deserve better than what they've gotten in the last 7 years from this White House.